Hi, Kirsty Young here. Today we're going to look at weeds. It's early summer here in Tasmania. We've had more rain than usual thanks to La Nina weather system, and the weeds are going mad. They've taken over those areas of my garden that haven't been mulched. Hello Vicky. But don't despair, you can still grow good things in amongst the weeds, and the weeds can be repairing your garden. The source of some of the following comments. You coming up, Vic? Hello Vicky. Hello Vicky. Have you come to give gardening advice? Have you come to give gardening advice, you little mutt? Yes you are. Look at the camera, Vic. Okay. I have 4 books that I have used quite a lot over the years. Plus I have done reading from many other sources over the years. My 2 favourite books on companion planting are these. I don't know if they're still in print. I've had them a long time. One I picked up at a second-hand shop when I already had the other one, but it contains stuff that this one here doesn't. So I use them both together regularly, even now. This book is just on growing herbs. It's the best little book on herbs that I've ever found. I came across it at a newsagent's one day, and it talks about what climate zones these herbs like to grow in, which many books on herb growing don't. But this book, my scrapbook, over the years has been the most helpful book that I've had. I started it in Darwin in 1994, so that will be 26 years ago, 27 this year. It has a wealth of information in it, anything from nutrient deficiencies to growing individual plants. Now I have 2 dogs here. You're right there, you two? Anyway, let's have a look at the weeds. Let us take a little tour of the weeds in my garden. This is not a weed as such, it's Swiss chard, also called silver beet, which has self-sowed from further up the garden. There's grass, plantain, the heads of which are good for diarrhea, I'm told. This heading grass is ryegrass. The milk thistle is having a lovely time. We do get Scotch thistles in here as well. I do dig those out wherever I see them because they're very bitey. This is only a little bit bitey. There's this thing here, I don't know what it is, but it does have a long taproot. I planted this yellow nasturtium, which virtually took up this whole bed, but I ripped heaps of it out to make way for my little tomatoes and things. I threw some of it underneath a rose bush, and it's happily growing. This is the latest compost heap in making, and it's thriving in there as well, where it hasn't had other things dumped on top of it. There are potatoes growing in the background. I think this is wild radish, and it's having a lovely time as well. This is borage. It's not a weed as such, and I allow it to self-sow around the garden. I love it. And in the background here is chocolate mint, which is doing very well with our wetter than usual spring and summer. And up here we have a Scotch thistle happily doing its thing. Down here we have buzzies. These seed heads are fully ripe. You don't want to touch those. You don't want to brush against them with your shoes, the hem of your clothes, whatever. The seed heads will stick and then they will disintegrate and be a real pain in the neck to get off. This is carrot. It's not a weed. It is one I missed that went to seed, so I'm going to leave it. It's having a lovely time doing its own thing. Clover is quite prevalent in the garden. It's a nitrogen fixer. That means it draws nitrogen from the air and stores it in the roots. when the plant dies, the nitrogen is released from the root nodules back into the soil. Free nitrogen, which plants need for their green leafy growth. When all the building works were finished, I put down 18 kilograms of grass seed. Most of it was in here, about a quarter elsewhere. I planted 2 varieties, tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass, to help cope with our dry summers. 12 months later, the place was covered in clover. 12 months after that, the grass came back, and now the clover is making a reappearance. So they're actually about 50-50 at the moment, remembering that the clover does the job of bringing nitrogen to the soil. I don't know what this thing is, but there it is. This is Spurge. It has a milky white sap, which is good for removing warts. You just put the sap on the warts regularly until the wart disappears. There are a number of grasses here as well. This delicate little climber with the purple pea-type flowers and this type of seed pod tend to be nitrogen fixers. Anything from the pea family is. So if the weeds are doing just as much in your garden as anything else, don't despair. You can still grow good things in there. This potato plant looks very happy. This potato patch is quite heavily mulched, so I don't have the weed problems here. I hadn't mulched these beds because I had intended to weed them often. Ha ha ha. I was concerned that things like this barley grass would come up prolifically if I did mulch. The irony is, everything else did, and this is the only clump that I haven't been able to pull out because it is enmeshed in chives. So if one comes out, they both do. I don't believe this is true dandelion, but I don't know what its real name is, so I call it dandelion. This is sheep sorrel in flower and grows in acid areas. This is marjoram, so it's not a weed. I bought it on the unhappy plants table, but it's having a lovely time and is about to flower. I grew potatoes in here last year. This one is a volunteer. You can see by the wrinkly leaves that it is nutrient deficient. It is also in a particularly heavy section of ground. In fact, you can see a big lump of clay right there. I put this rose in last year and it didn't flower at all. This is the very heavy soil we were just looking at. I have mulched very heavily and it has paid off, even though you can still see that big lump of clay right there. This is chickweed, and chickweed is growing amongst the winter savoury. Tansy was planted deliberately. It makes a lovely addition to the garden. It is also good for intestinal worms for your poultry. I also have it growing in the chicken run. So this is what the garlic looked like that I harvested last week. I'm very, very happy with them. And these were all growing amongst the weeds. And furthermore, there's plenty of it. I have it in the workshop drying out. A very pleasing result.